On November 6, 1661, in a lavish royal palace in Madrid, Spain, a child named Charles II was born. From his very first breath, Charles wasn't the strong and healthy prince everyone had hoped for. He didn't cry loudly like other newborn babies. Instead, his cries were weak, barely audible, almost as if his tiny body already sensed the tragic destiny ahead. The Spanish Empire was huge, powerful, and wealthy, and Charles was supposed to inherit it all. Yet from the beginning, he showed signs that something was terribly wrong. His body was thin, fragile, and sickly. He couldn't feed properly, and doctors feared he might not survive his first night. The entire royal court held their breath in anxious uncertainty. Charles belonged to the famous Habsburg dynasty, a royal family that once ruled over vast territories. Across Europe, from Spain and Austria to Hungary and beyond, the Habsburgs were obsessed with keeping their bloodline pure, marrying relatives repeatedly to maintain their power and status. But this obsession turned into a deadly curse. Charles II was the living proof of what happens when humans defy nature's laws. This unfortunate prince was not suffering from war or disease from outside. He was born from centuries of closely related marriages within his own family. His fate was sealed by his bloodline, a tragic inheritance passed down through generations of royal inbreeding. So what turned a prince, who should have represented the strength of an entire empire, into one of history's saddest kings? It wasn't battles or plagues. It was the arrogance and misguided belief of a royal family, determined to control nature itself. To truly understand Charles II's tragic story, we must look closely at his family's history. Charles belonged to the famous Habsburg family, one of Europe's most powerful royal dynasties. At their peak, the Habsburgs ruled not just Spain, but also Austria, Hungary, and large parts of Europe. They controlled vast territories across continents and believed their royal blood was superior to everyone else's. But this belief came at a terrible price. For generations, the Habsburgs insisted on marrying their own relatives' cousins, married cousins, uncles, married nieces, and sometimes even closer relationships occurred. Their goal was to keep their bloodline pure and ensure that power stayed within the family. However, what they didn't realize, or perhaps refused to admit, was that this practice was slowly destroying them from within. Charles II's parents, King Philip IV and Mariana of Austria, were a perfect example. Mariana was not only Philip's niece, but also his cousin, meaning Charles's parents were related in multiple ways. By the time Charles was born, his family tree had become dangerously tangled through generations of repeated intermarriage. Result was a royal family plagued by severe health problems and deformities. Charles's birth revealed the consequences of the Habsburg obsession with pure blood. He inherited physical and mental conditions caused by generations of inbreeding. The family's stubborn desire to control nature, to concentrate power within their own bloodline, turned into a disaster. Charles II became not a symbol of royal strength, but a tragic reminder of human arrogance. His life wasn't just affected by his parents' choices. It was shaped by hundreds of decisions made long before he was even born, decisions rooted in pride, fear, and a mistaken belief that royal blood alone could guarantee greatness. Charles II's childhood was very different from that of most royal princes. Instead of playing and laughing freely, he grew up isolated in the huge, cold halls of the Spanish palace. From an early age, he was surrounded by servants, doctors, and courtiers who observed him anxiously. He couldn't speak clearly until he was 4 years old, and was unable to walk properly without help until he was 18 age, when most children would already be running around carefree. His body showed clear signs of his family's genetic problems. Charles was thin, weak, and frequently ill. His most obvious feature was the famous Habsburg jaw, a severe physical deformity that made it difficult for him to close his mouth fully or chew food properly. Eating became a daily struggle, causing discomfort and embarrassment in front of others. Charles's caretakers dressed him in expensive clothes, but these royal garments couldn't hide his physical problems. Court painters created portraits of the young prince, showing him as healthy and powerful, carefully hiding the truth of his condition. Behind these paintings, however, everyone knew the reality was different. Charles wasn't thriving. He was barely surviving. Most tragically, Charles never received real warmth or love from his parents. He was not seen as a child who needed care and affection, but as an important political project. He had to represent strength and stability, despite feeling weak and confused. Instead of childhood joy, he experienced constant pressure, judgment, and silent disappointment. Charles was born a prince, destined for greatness. But he was robbed of a normal childhood by the expectations and mistakes of his ancestors. He grew up trapped within his own fragile body and the cold palace walls, feeling lonely and unwanted, unaware that the harshest years of his life were yet to come. As Charles II entered his teenage years, the problems caused by centuries of family inbreeding became painfully obvious. Physically, he continued to suffer from serious health conditions. His jaw protruded sharply, making it impossible for him to speak clearly or eat properly. His teeth never aligned, causing constant pain, and his tongue was too large for his mouth, forcing him to speak in mumbles and whispers that few people could understand clearly. Royal physicians were desperate, trying treatments such as bloodletting and bizarre herbal remedies, but nothing could heal Charles. His health only worsened, and his body grew weaker every year. By his late teens, Charles was already aging prematurely. His hair thinned, his skin became pale and dry, and his strength faded quickly after any physical activity. Yet, the court continued to pretend everything was fine. Charles was presented to foreign ambassadors dressed in luxurious clothing, with royal ceremonies hiding his fragile condition behind symbols of power and wealth. Portraits depicted him as strong and regal, but beneath this facade, he was in constant pain and isolation. Emotionally, his teenage years were just as tragic. Charles felt lonely and misunderstood. He had no real friends, only advisors and servants who saw him as a political tool rather than a person. As he approached adulthood, the pressure to produce an heir grew heavier. His family and kingdom expected him to marry and continue the Habsburg bloodline, yet nobody openly admitted that his frail health made this task almost impossible. Charles lived in silent suffering, imprisoned in a body shaped by his family's obsession with royal purity. He had no choice but to carry the burden created by generations before him, a burden he never asked for, yet one he would carry until the end of his days. As Charles reached adulthood, the pressure from the court became overwhelming. He needed an heir to continue the Habsburg line, to preserve Spain's influence and empire. Charles married twice, but both marriages were unhappy, overshadowed by constant worry about producing children. His first wife, Marie-Louise of Orleans, was beautiful and healthy, and Spain hoped she would bear strong heirs. But their marriage produced no children. Court gossip blamed her unfairly, ignoring Charles's obvious health issues. Marie-Louise felt isolated and deeply unhappy. She died tragically young, leaving Charles once again alone, childless, and facing increasing political pressure. Undeterred, the court arranged another marriage, this time with Maria Anna of Neuburg, a determined German princess. Again, the kingdom waited anxiously for news of pregnancy. Once again, hope turned into disappointment. Charles's genetic legacy had left him infertile, incapable of producing an heir. Doctors, priests, and advisors blamed everyone except the truth, the Habsburg family's own dangerous decisions. These marriages were not about love or companionship. They were desperate attempts to save a collapsing dynasty. Charles was caught in a cruel cycle. His worth was measured by something he physically couldn't accomplish. Each failed pregnancy deepened his sense of inadequacy and despair. Charles and his wives lived under immense pressure, feeling responsible for the empire's fate, yet powerless to fulfill their duties. Charles was a king, but he was also a prisoner trapped in an impossible situation, defined by expectations he could never meet. His marriages symbolized not hope, but desperation, a final attempt to rescue an empire doomed by generations of harmful choices. As Charles II approached his late 30s, his health collapsed entirely. His body became so frail he could hardly stand or breathe properly. Each day, he drifted closer to death, his thin frame resembling an old man more than a middle-aged king. Doctors reported shocking symptoms. His hair turned white, teeth fell out, and his weakened heart struggled to keep him alive. Charles died quietly at the age of 39, surrounded by a handful of servants. He left no heir, and his death triggered a crisis that shook all of Europe. The Spanish throne was suddenly empty, and the mighty Habsburg dynasty in Spain ended abruptly. Without Charles, Europe descended into the War of the Spanish Succession, one of the continent's bloodiest conflicts. His death wasn't just personal tragedy, it became a political disaster. Ironically, Charles's body was autopsied after death, revealing horrifying internal abnormalities: his lungs, heart, and intestines severely damaged by genetic illness. The official records blamed illnesses, but everyone secretly knew the truth. Charles had died because his own family insisted on keeping their blood pure. The fall of the empire was not caused by external enemies, but by internal choices. Charles's sad, lonely death was the final blow, highlighting the devastating consequences of his family's arrogance. His legacy was not glorious victories or power, but a powerful lesson about what happens when humanity tries to control nature's laws. Today, Charles II's story serves as a powerful warning. He wasn't just a king who died tragically young. He represents the danger of obsession with power, pride, and purity at the expense of basic humanity. Charles reminds us that behind every political decision, there's a human cost. His short life and painful death are reminders that true strength comes not from bloodlines, wealth, or status, but from health, love, and respect for natural boundaries. His tragedy highlights how decisions made by previous generations continue to shape the lives of those who follow, often in devastating ways. Charles's story forces us to question what really matters in life. Is power worth sacrificing happiness, health, and humanity itself? Should families, dynasties, or nations ever place their ambitions above the well-being of individuals? Charles, too, didn't choose his destiny, was forced upon him. His tragic life and the collapse of the Habsburg Empire demonstrate clearly that attempting to defy nature leads only to suffering. Ultimately, Charles leaves us a timeless lesson. Power that ignores humanity is doomed to destroy itself from. Within this is the legacy Charles II of Spain leaves behind, a powerful reminder to respect life, nature, and humanity above all else. It's a message that resonates strongly, even centuries after his death, a cautionary tale warning us against repeating history's darkest mistakes.